This conference will now be recorded.
All right, I would like to call to order this special town council meeting for Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. We'll get into the agenda, and before we get into the substantive items, I'll make my standard virtual meeting announcements. So please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Fishbein,
Here.
Laffin,
Here.
Maroney,
Here.
Morgenstein, Shortell, Tata,
Here.
Testa, Zandri,
Here.
Chairman Cervoni.
Here. We do have a quorum. For the benefit of those new to this process, members of the public, please keep all of your microphones muted during the meeting unless you're the person asking a question. Also, kindly keep your camera inactive unless you're speaking. This system does not deal well with multiple simultaneous speakers. The audio from only one person will come through at a time. Therefore, please only speak if you've been recognized. I don't need a gavel. I have a mute all button. And if people are not participating respectfully, I'll be forced to mute so that the person who has the floor can be heard. We'll now proceed to go through the agenda. If you wish to question or comment regarding a particular agenda item, please type into the chat bar that you do. If you look in one of the top corners of your screen, you'll see a cartoon text bubble. When you click on that icon, a strip will appear on the side of your screen. You can type into that strip that you have a request to speak. I'll first look for questions from those who are logged in digitally, and then I will go to those who have dialed in with a telephone. If you do intend to comment, you must introduce yourself by stating your name and address for the record. Also, in light of events at certain meetings, I want to remind participants of our rules. With respect to agenda items, the public will be given 20 minutes after the council comments, and each member of the public will be given 3 minutes. Also, the council rules in our rules 16A and B require participants, both on the council and members of the public, should refrain at all times from rude or derogatory remarks, reflections as to integrity, abusive comments, and statements as to motives or personalities. With that, the first action item on the agenda is item 3. Forgive me, hang on. All right. Okay. Item 3, actually, Mr. Zandri, this was your agenda item, so if you'd like to start.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm actually looking for my agenda right now. Can you read me the agenda item, please, so I can confirm?
It is discussion and possible action regarding mayor's veto on May 14, 2021 of the 21-22 budget adopted by the town council on May 11th.
Thank you. I wanted to read it into the minutes, and I wanted to make sure I had it right. So I was looking around for it and I couldn't find it. I'd like to ask Mr. Chairman if I could get the ability to share out my spreadsheet to kind of aid in the discussion.
Are you going to make a motion?
Yeah, certainly. I'd like to make a motion that the town council consider to a vote to overturn the mayoral veto and restore the town council budget.
Second.
I heard a second. It sounded like Councilor Tata. And Councilor Zandri, you now have presenter privileges.
All right, awesome. I'm trying to get it. All right, perfect. So I think you guys can see my spreadsheet. So yeah, I've often referred to this spreadsheet, in prior meetings. This is something that I've been maintaining for quite some time now, number of years going back to the 2003 and 2004 budget. And I just would like to make, a few points as to, why we're here today and why we really want to drive this item home. And, I kind of implore the council to kind of reconsider its position, because without any reconsideration from our vote, we're going to be stuck at the 6-3 where we were on passing our budget, which was ultimately vetoed by the mayor. So a couple of the points that the mayor, made in his letter to us is that, there's never been a year where, we've allocated as much out of the designated reserves to the budget to offset the difference of a tax increase. And he's absolutely correct about that. Based on the changes that Councilor Tata brought in and that we ultimately voted 6-3 to pass. We inflated that bottom number there that you can see on the 21-22 budget of 6.4. We brought it all the way up to 7.9 by doing it. So that would bring it up $500,000 more than it's ever been. But I'd like to make a few points out. So the very first thing that I would like to make a point of is 2016-2017 year where we were 4.2 allocated. And then the following year, 17-18, where we allocated 7.2. There was a $3 million increase that year from year over year. And that was actually after we actually consumed from the year prior. So let me step back for a moment. We allocated 4.2 the year prior, and we actually consumed 1.4 of that. So it actually dragged down the general fund balance from 29.25 million to 27.83 million. So that was a year that we allocated 4.2 and actually consumed 1.4. Then we raised it by $3 million the following year. So we allocated 3 million more. That's a huge jump. That's more than a 50% jump. And then we actually burned that year 1.5. So we knocked down the general fund balance even more to 26.2. Now, if we're really being honest about differentials, that would be a year to really point something out. But the other thing that I would rather point out, or I should say similarly point out, is let's go all the way back to 2005 and 2006 when we designated 6.9. That was a year after we designated 5.5. If you inflation adjust that for today's dollars, that's a $9.2 million allocation. So, okay, sure. Today, going to a $7.9 million allocation, it looks pretty steep. But not when you consider the fact that if you inflation adjust the worst year we ever had, that was 9.2. The other things that I would like to call out is in a way, what we designate out of this column almost doesn't matter. And when I say it almost doesn't matter, it's because what we need to look at is what we actually spend. Because we could be, using an everyday example, we could leave to go on a business trip. And, we're going to earn some money while we're traveling, and we have to spend some money while we're traveling, and we're trying to make an end result. So we're going to leave and allocate $5,000 for our expenses. When we come back, if we had a bad business trip and we returned $4,000, that means we consumed $1,000. All the money we made during the business trip got consumed plus an additional $1,000. If we leave for a business trip and we allocate $5,000 and we return with $7,000, that means we're going to put the $5,000 back and we made a $2,000 profit. So it was a successful business trip. The reason I make that example is because it's a little bit more of a palatable number because it's smaller. But when you look at these designated numbers, and I'm going to call out the years that we, all right, instead of even recalling out the years we returned a lot, let's look at the 3 most recent years where we consumed some. Let's take a look at 2016 and 17, where we allocated 4.2 and consumed 1.4. Well, what if the allocation for that year had been 14,200,000? We would have returned 11 million, more than $11 million. We still would have only consumed 1.4. It doesn't matter what the allocation was. We would have only still spent 1.4. If this was a $17 million allocation in 17 and 18, we still would have only consumed 1.5. It doesn't matter if this year is a 6.4 or a 7.9. What matters is when it's done, whether we return all of it or return most of it. And if we consume some of it, that's part of the allocation. Let's look at the current year right now that's closing in about 35 days. We allocated $7.4 million to that budget from this designated reserves. It is the highest one shown here. There isn't a number higher anywhere in that column. $7.4 million allocated. We are on track to return all of it. And then potentially, according to the numbers that we're getting from Mr. Bose, we are on track right now to surplus $2 million. So we are on track if all the bills finish out the way that money's being spent, all the invoices come in, all of the end numbers are run. By what we're being shown right now is there's a $2 million under consumption of the budget that we passed over a year ago. That means that 7.4 that we allocated is going to get returned, and we're going to add $2 million on top of it. That'll ultimately, if that comes to pass, and I caution on it, if it comes to pass, that general fund balance will be $30 million. I'm asking all of the other counselors to consider their original votes, and those that voted no to reconsider their position. The reason that I'm asking this is multifaceted, but it's a simple one. There are great things that are in this budget. It's a good budget. It's a solid budget, but we've got the ability to put money aside for community pool. That's a good thing to do for the community. We should have done this already. It's also good that we've got an element in there for Harrison Park for the pickleball courts. That's going to get lost if we let this veto ride. But the most important thing that I want to remind everybody is that we would have liked to do the same thing this year that we did last year, and that would be to have a flat mill rate so that we weren't pushing a tax increase onto the people. But there's no way to practically do that. If you take a look down the bottom, the very bottom of my chart down here, there's this revaluation. Because certain people's homes appreciated more than others and they were reevaluated differently, even if we could find a way to flatten out the mill rate to whatever number might have been adjusted for the differential, some people would have paid nothing more. Other people might have paid still a little bit more if their house appreciated more. And if their house appreciated a little bit less, they would be actually paying less in taxes. And the same thing for businesses. Businesses appreciated at a different rate, so they may be plus or minus on this bill. There was no way to get to zero this year. But what this budget did, this council budget did, was it lowered the tax burden by $1.5 million on the residents and the businesses of this town. And it did so by doing nothing more than manipulating the amount of money that we're going to allocate out of the designated reserves. It doesn't mean we're going to spend it. We're going to bookmark it. We're going to earmark it so that it keeps us from having to require more money from the people in the form of taxes to have a budget at $177 million so that we can function this upcoming fiscal year. I would love to have a flat mill rate and a no tax increase, but this is better than not having anything at all. By doing this, it doesn't put any burden on the taxpayer in the way of lost services by allocating more funds to this effort. But what it does do is it trims down the tax burden for this tax fiscal year, this tax season. Instead of having the median assessed home in Wallingford be assessed for an additional $150, it's only going to be assessed for about an additional $100. And I think that's the most important thing that we can all take away from this. By allocating another $1.5 million from reserves, not spending it, committing it to the allocation line, and then dealing with the budget as it unfolds in front of us, we have an opportunity here to ease the burden on the taxpayers of Wallingford. And I would like to ask all the councilors to consider that as you consider this vote this evening to overturn the mayoral veto. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I understand that Councilor Testa is dialed in, and I just want to see if I can identify.
I couldn't get my sound to work. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but I'm back, and hopefully you can hear me.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you appear to be caller 6.
Okay, thank you. I forgot I did something wrong with the pin so that my audio wouldn't work. So I'm on the call.
If you could
Thank you.
mute yourself while you're not talking, that would make my life easier.
No, I'm going to do that again just right now. I had been.
Thank you. All right. With that, the next member of the council that's requested to comment is Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to rehash the points made during previous meetings, but I do have a few comments specifically related to the veto of this budget and why I feel we should vote to overturn it. This veto in the budget in general should not be viewed as the mayor versus the council. I've stated previously that I feel that the mayor's budget is a solid and fiscally responsible budget. However, we are tasked by the charter and by our constituents to improve upon the mayor's proposed budget. Arguably, this may be the most important job that we as councilors have. Last year, the town council analyzed years of spending and department surpluses and deficits to come up with a plan for spending cuts, and that budget was vetoed. So this year, taking a different approach, we said, rather than cut, let's find money to give back to the taxpayer. And we did, and that budget was also vetoed. So I just want to break down the budget process a little bit. Just as the department heads present their budgets and the mayor tweaks them and makes improvements before presenting the budget to us, so do we spend months analyzing it and making improvements where we see fit. Similarly, the school administrators present requests to the superintendent, who creates a budget and sends it to the Board of Ed, who then tweaks it and sends it to the mayor, who then tweaks it and sends it to us, and then we can improve upon it even more. So my point here is that in each step of the process, thorough analysis is done and edits are made by many different people in town, both employees and elected officials. This is what this council did, and 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats agreed that the edits we made were worthy and were what the people of Wallingford wanted. So isn't it best for the people we represent if the department heads and the administration and the legislature all work together to improve upon the budget and make it the best it can be right up until the finished product, which is where we are tonight? The budget should not be comprised of just one person's ideas, but through the ideas and work of everyone involved in it, including the 9 of us. So the 3 ideas that were presented this year were the spending of $60,000 for pickleball courts at Harrison Park, which through the way we did it has no tax effect. Number 2 was the earmarking of $1 million for community pool. Again, the way that we got that money, which we all understand has no tax effect. And then the 3rd amendment was the 0.33 mill rate reduction by allocating 1.5 million more reserves, and that does lower taxes. Of the 3 amendments, if the veto stands, procedurally, the pickleball courts could still happen, as could community pool. While the majority of us agree that those 2 projects should be included, those projects may not be dead even if the veto stands. But the mill rate, which is the 3rd amendment, cannot be changed after tonight. It will be a done deal. The tax rate will be set tonight. So really, what the vote tonight boils down to is this: a mill rate of 28.85, the mayor's budget, or a mill rate of 28.52, the council's budget. So simply put, a vote to override the veto is a vote for lower taxes, and a vote to uphold the veto will result in higher taxes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up is Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I guess the biggest problem that I have with the council budget is the earmarking of the money for community pool. Not to say that I'm against community pool in any way, shape, or form, but action by this body to, in effect, lock up that money, which could be used for many other things. We all know the community pool, if it's to be redone, is going to cost well in excess of $1 million. That overture is either with the intent of perhaps reducing the bond initiative that would be necessary for that, or it's strictly a political move to say we agree with community pool. I don't think that that's a responsible way to deal with the reserves that are in cap and non. And I offer that, I think most of us on various occasions have expressed concern with the amount of money that's in that account that's just not earmarked for anything, that from the good work of our town has come under budget and has, I think, a couple of $1 million in there. I think this body has the ability to modify our ordinances to give us, the council, a greater level of control over the utilization of those reserves in that account. Our ordinance presently requires a recommendation by the mayor. Well, we could change that. If the mayor vetoes that change, then we can override that change, that by overriding the veto. I think we would perhaps have more than enough votes to do that, to gain a level of control that addresses our frustration. I also think going forward that there should be some sort of portion of the budget that's similar to appropriations in force, that the council has to do something with those reserves on an annual basis. At least acknowledge that they're there by vote, or through that power of the ordinance, be able to do something with that, to do for another capital project, let's say, or something, not just to let that money that was appropriated for capital expenditures linger. So that's my biggest problem with the town council budget as is before us, and I just wanted that to be clear. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fishbein, I have to say, while I am not at all opposed to the redevelopment of the community pool park, I do agree with you with what you said about the allocation of the pilot money as the council's budget does that. For the benefit of somebody who has asked about the North Farms Road presentation, after the council takes its vote on the motion that's on the table, that is the very next item, and that will comprise the balance of the meeting to follow. And I'm just scanning the chat bar to see if there is any other request to comment from the council, and I do not see any other requests to comment from the council. And so there is a question comment from someone who is identified as owner. Mr. Chardulo, I think that might be you.
I think that is me.
Okay, so please name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, please? Okay, thanks. Yes, sir. First of all, I want to say that I'm a little disappointed that we're not here tonight talking about eliminating the tax increase completely, rather than discussing overriding a veto of a 0.3 mils. And I have a question for the mayor, Mr. Chairman, and that is, how can you, Mr. Mayor, justify increasing the expense budget this year, your proposed budget, by a little over $4 million? That's $4 million, by the way, that compares to the budget for this year. And in no way are we going to spend the amount of money that's in the budget this year. And I'll go into that a little more later. So the expenses that are put in there are extremely high. And we're doing this in the middle of a pandemic, when many residents are struggling and trying to, work through this thing. It's been a brutal year, as we can all attest to. And my understanding is that the federal government has allocated $8 million to our town. I understand that the mayor has made a decision and believes that, we should set that aside and not deal with that in this budget. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's a decision that he's made. That's certainly not something that I would agree to if I were involved in that. And if you think about it, parts of the town during this pandemic have essentially been closed. And rightly so, because the pandemic has been brutal. So we've, I know I occasionally go to the senior center, right? That was closed. A number of other places. I mean, the PD was obviously had to be out there, and fire department. But that really suppressed some of our expenses. And that's actually reflected in the data if we take a hard look at it. So that's my question. How do you justify this, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Chardulo, before I let the mayor answer your question, I'm just going to ask you to give us your name and address for the record, please.
Paul Chardulo, 2 Bayberry Drive, Wallingford, Connecticut.
Thank you very much. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chardulo, the budget is built upon what are expected expenses coming year. Yes, there were reduced levels of service. However, core personnel in all departments continued to work. They might not have had as many programs, but they still had programs. And that was felt to be important because there was an outlet for people who needed to get out of the house, get exercise, just a variety of things. We didn't shut down any of our services. Wallingford government offices were open. That's not true across the state, but we as a general rule, on the core services, even beyond the core services, Wallingford was open for business because we knew that people needed assistance. They needed to be reassured that everyone wasn't just abandoning the town and leave everyone up to their own devices. But whether it was utilities, or whether police and fire, or whether public works, or the offices in town hall, because none of those emergency services can work unless they're getting paychecks. Well, that's the finance department. How are you going to make sure you have checks for people if there's no one in the finance department? So those are just some examples of the reason why there was a need to continue, and we had to spend money in order to provide those services. The money coming from the federal government, I think it's some 4.6 million to education and 4.3 earmarked for the town. As yet, we don't have detailed instructions what it can be spent on, but the abbreviated instructions indicated it couldn't be used to offset a mill rate decrease. It couldn't be used to pay pension costs. It only could be used for very narrow purposes. And like I say, we're waiting to find out what the details are on how we can spend that money. For education, there really were very few, if any, limits on what education will be able to do with that money. 50% of it is paid supposedly sometime this month, and 50% will be paid next year, on or about May of next year. But like I say, we don't have details. We have a duty to see that there's a continuity of services. We do the best we can to see that happens. But the surest way to reduce the cost of government is to eliminate some portion or some service of some kind, because most of the expense is in employees. We weren't at the point that we felt that we should be reducing services, especially under the conditions that we were faced with. So there are no easy decisions. We also truly believe that the town has a duty to maintain a credit reserve. It's a reassurance to the public that we're dealing with public money in a responsible manner. And it is that safety net should there be a major calamity of some kind, and we need funds to cover. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, well, I think that I've been very happy with the work that the town has done during the pandemic, even though, as I say, I think some of the expenditures have been impacted. But that's not my major point. I guess what I'm going to say is that fundamentally, the numbers don't add up, period. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you go back to page 1, I'm looking at the summary of your budget, and you look at the fiscal year that we just completed, 1920, in June, just last June. The budget was $169,187. That was the budget. When we ended the year, our expenses came in at $163,174. That means we underspent by $6,013,000. On the revenue side, we actually came in at $172,006,000. If you look at the first column of the summary, I don't think that gives a complete picture. And by that, I mean, it's showing on the revenue side, 166 million, but it does not include the fund balance. which should be in there. You can't put fund balance money in the budget at the beginning of the year to justify to balance the budget. And then in most cases, add a tax on top of that. And then not include it when you're measuring performance to budget. So the reality is revenue came in at 2.819 million above the budget. So we had a total surplus between the revenue and the expenses of 8,833,000. Now, granted, 6 million of that was the fund balance that we didn't use. We didn't touch a penny of it. And the other 2.8 came from the fact that we overachieved the revenue. All right. So that's where we were at the end of the year 1920. Fast forward to the current year, which is 2021. We have a budget today of 172,840,000. First of all, I want to say that that column should reflect the forecast, not the budget. And this is a subject that we talked about previously in other meetings, but we keep coming back to the same thing. That column shows the budget. Okay, so that's what we're working with. We will never achieve that budget. We will never spend 172,840,000. Why do I say that? Well, if you go and look at the March financial report, which reflects the first 9 months of the fiscal year, our expenses are running at under $14 million plus. The same as last year. We went through this last year. So it's very unlikely that we're going to come even close to 172 million.
Mr. Chardulo, I'm going to ask you to wrap up. I read the rules at the beginning of the meeting. Public are allowed 3 minutes, and I think you've pretty well doubled that.
Okay. All right. Well, let me summarize by saying that the numbers don't add up. I wish that the council would study the numbers instead of focusing on other areas, because the combination of the audit reports and the monthly reports tell the story, and anybody can look at it, and it's not even complex if you study it. So I'll end by saying I definitely support overriding the veto, and I would like to recommend that someone on the council today make a proposal to zero out any tax increase and to reduce the expenditures accordingly, because we are millions and millions of dollars under what we're budgeting.
Mr. Chardulo, we can't do that tonight. That would violate the charter. The only budget item on the floor right now is
okay. That's
to address the mayor's veto. Thank you.
Gotcha. I appreciate the opportunity to get that on the books. They're on the record. Thank you.
Yep. Before we come back to the council, we have a question from Bob. Name and address for the record, please.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. I have a question to the council and then to the mayor. Does the budget have to be adopted tonight, or does the budget have to be adopted next week?
The budget was to be adopted last Tuesday. The mayor had 10 days, and then under the charter, the mayor had 10 days within which to veto, and the mayor exercised the veto on Friday. That gave the council 10 days within which to respond. So that's all we can address at this point.
So if the budget is vetoed, it just means that it adopts the council's budget, or can you make changes to it?
The mayor's veto reverts overturns the council's budget. And that's the state of things right now. And the only thing we can address tonight is the council's attempt to overturn the veto and restore the council's budget.
And if it restores the council's budget, is that the final budget, or can that be altered before, can that be altered?
That's the final budget, and there are means in the charter that allow certain transfers to occur during the year, but that sets the mill rate.
Because does the town or the mayor know when the state's going to give its final analysis of ways that the town can spend money? Because I see other towns spending the money already for projects.
Mayor, Mr. Bose, Mr. Senna, any of you know the answer to that question?
Yes, some towns are doing things, some aren't. We, for our budget purposes, one of the accepted ways of spending was to cover lost revenue due to the pandemic, which that's where we are using some of that money in order to cover lost revenue. Expected revenue, but due to the pandemic and changes in doing business, et cetera, we are covering lost revenue, such as ambulance. Just a few. But that's the only place that we felt that we were able to, with any justification, be using any of that money until we got further, till the town has received further detailed instructions from the U.S. Department of Treasury.
So you've spent money to just the ambulance fund?
We haven't spent any money. We are forecasting using those grant funds in order to offset revenue we would expect to have received, but because of the pandemic, we didn't receive.
But I'm confused. If it's for something you've already budgeted for, and it was in the budget, to Mr. Jardillo's point, if it's already in the budget, you've already funded the amount for the ambulance fund for last year. So why would you make it? So if they didn't bring in a few dollars, you've already funded for it and paid all the employees. And you're getting, and
We're not covering the loss
you're most likely having a fund balance surplus already. So why would you put more money into something you're running a surplus on?
We're not, we're budgeting for the future year. Our past year showed a severe loss, we believe, because of the pandemic. So we are continuing with the amount that we would expect to receive. We're not using that as the figure in this budget, because otherwise we'd be budgeting a lower figure.
Then how much money do you feel that you lost last year?
If I
Did you lose,
if I
and
may
where
also-
did you lose it?
if I may
Yes.
add to the mayor's comment, Jim Bowes, comptroller. That is part of our request in the upcoming budget year. But however, when the funds, the first payment, if you will, arrives at the town, we will come back to the council with a request, an authorization, an appropriation, if you will, of those revenues, and an appropriation of the utilization of those revenues, both on the general government side and on the school side. So it's not part of the general fund. These funds are going to be almost like a special revenue fund. It's not going to be commingled in with general funds. And of course, by then, there will be further guidance. There has been, like the mayor said, some preliminary guidance. And now the guidance is getting a little bit more specific. And I think there's a meeting next week, some type of virtual meeting with regards to some of the uses of those funds. So we're kind of right now in the sort of in limbo a little bit, waiting for the fund, at least that first tranche of funds to come. So that this way we can come to the council with something concrete. So that's where we are now.
Okay, so again, the question is, where did you lose the money and where was the shortfall? And how much?
I don't have a listing in front of me. I don't,
You
but it's
assume it's
also,
gonna be over $4 million? I'm just speeding up because.
no,
we're
it's not gonna
here.
be, it won't be $4 million. It's gonna be, well within $4 million. And then the rest of the funds, there will be utilized, for the appropriation, request to the council. Once we have a firmer knowledge, and can come forward to the council with a lot of confidence that says, okay, these are the allowed uses. There are towns right now that are sort of, I think, and that's my humble opinion, Bob, I don't know, but from what I've read so far, are using it to reduce costs in their operating school budgets. I don't know how they can justify that when it was even said in, frankly, in some of the preliminary guidance, that is not a utilization of those funds. So
But some are using it for infrastructure. Some are using it for infrastructure.
that's correct. Well,
So-
let me finish.
Okay.
And when, at that time, when we have, some of these items basically solidified, that's when we will come back before the council. And of course, that'll be a meeting that's, and public input. And I believe there may be some infrastructure requests in there, but you have to sort of adhere to what the federal government is allowing for those monies. A lot of it has to do with some sewer infrastructure, some water infrastructure, things of this nature. I did not see anything with regards to roads and sidewalks and bridges. However, that doesn't mean that they haven't changed. I know they've been getting input from municipalities throughout the country since this act was passed. So, but yes, I do think that some infrastructure is going to be part of that request for funds. So, and then some revenue loss, and I don't have the list with me, but it's that will be addressed as well.
So,
Does that help out?
No. So the question is,
Sorry.
the four, not counting the Board of Ed's four point something million, the town's going to receive 4 point something million, a little less than the Board of Ed. Do you feel you have a shortfall for 4 point X number of million dollars this year that you're going to try and make up with this money? And if so, where is for something
No,
shortfall?
No, I just addressed that, Bob. It's not gonna be anywhere near $4 million.
So, okay, so that's fine. So,
No, I'm sorry, if I didn't emphasize that, Bob, I apologize, but no,
So
it won't be
then
anywhere, near $4 million.
do you know where so then where would this money go? Why? So to Ms. Councilor Tata's point, there's going to be millions coming into the town to be spent. You're going to be able to spend some of this on some type of infrastructure that's already budgeted for. You can spend these dollars on that infrastructure projects, and then that frees up the other money to offset. If you follow your budget and you can spend this money certain ways within your budget that you already have going to adopt, that would give us even a greater surplus next year of potentially 3 or 4 million on top of the millions of dollars of surplus that you're probably going to run anyway. Because just a case in point, in the mayor's budget, I don't see that anybody's been appointed for government media yet. So there's $100,000 line item that's not probably going to be funded or used. So, and there's other items also. So the question becomes, there's millions upon millions of dollars going to be available. So to make a veto tonight would just support the town citizens and businesses by giving them some type of small, but albeit small, but some kind of tax break. And I think the council should override the budget for those reasons, because there's going to be millions of dollars in surplus by the time next year comes around. Thank you.
Chairman, I just want to respond, to the issue of the infrastructure. Infrastructure by the preliminary directions is only for water and sewer project infrastructure. So that it could affect their rates, but it's limited to that. The other issue is there's another eligible way to spend the money, and we've tasked Economic Development Commission with a program that will look to assist households, businesses, nonprofits, et cetera, that sustained losses, maybe closed during the pandemic. So it's a program that we would have to have eligibility, review applications, and that is an acceptable use for the funds. So at this point, we have no idea how many may be interested in that program, but given the money is available, we want to see that it gets back to people. It's made available to them, so there will be a process for application and decision making with regard to money for that part of the program.
So the mayor's saying that once again, they're going to pick winners and losers instead of spreading out over the broad constituents of the entire town. You're going to allow certain businesses who potentially have suffered, maybe not. And yes, it was a pandemic and everybody suffered. Well, not everybody. There were some businesses that did very well, but for the majority, there was suffering going on, not only health-wise, but financially. But the state has stepped in for a lot of these, and so has the federal government through the PPPs and through grants and all those types of things. And there's money been coming into some of these if you knew how to apply for them. And if we had maybe a grant writer, maybe we could have applied for some of them also. It's just, I think, to pick winners and losers again, because the mayor mentioned this in his budget address. We're not even talking, if you go to Councilor Tada's motion, it is not even the whole 4-point-something million. Councilor Tada's talking $1.5 million. And so, Mayor, that would help at least all the citizens and businesses in the town of Wallingford equitably and equally. Thank you.
Chairman,
Can't use it for that.
I just want to clear up. The program is dictated to us.
Yeah.
We don't choose the program to determine winners and losers, as Mr. Gross indicated. They're indicating that we can have a program. You're limited how you can spend the funds. One of the potential uses is to have a program that assists those who suffered losses during the pandemic. We didn't come up with it. That's coming from the federal government.
Thank you. Next from the public is Mr. Bogert, and then we are out of time for public comment. We'll come back to the council. Thank you, Ms. Councilor Morgenstein, for your patience.
Hello, my name is David Bogert, and I live at 12 Meadowland Road in Wallingford. This is my first town council meeting that I've attended, but in watching the budget workshops unfold these past weeks, I felt compelled to come and speak. I have the utmost respect for our mayor and many of our town council members and can appreciate the strong financial standing that this leadership has led this town to. But with that said, if there was ever a year to consider dipping into our nearly 29 million in reserves, I can't think of a more appropriate time. Coming off of a worldwide pandemic and coupled with an already likely tax increase, care of this year's property assessments, what's the purpose of having a rainy day fund if not to aid us in these challenging times? Or said differently, if the events of these past 15 months don't classify as the type of emergency that this town has been saving for, then I ask you what will. I recognize that the mayor's budget does allocate some $6.7 million versus the council's $7.9 million. But I also recognize that just like the budgets that pass my desk in the private sector, there is extra padding. Notably, with the exit of the fire chief, police chief, and superintendent, in addition to all the open heads, salaries alone are likely overstated. And fast forwarding a year from now, I'll be surprised if, as in years past, we don't end up not needing to use any of those funds after all. The difference is your constituents won't have been overtaxed. In closing, I'd like to specifically address Councilman Fishbein. I recognize that you typically refuse to vote for tax increases, and I, like many other Wallingford residents, will still experience one even with the town council's budget. But by not joining your peers in overturning the mayor's veto, in essence, you are voting for an even larger tax hike. I hope you will take that into consideration. Thank you.
All right, under the wire, Mr. O'Connell, your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Riley O'Connell, 30 Northford Road. Mr. Bogert actually said part of what I wanted to say, so I'll make my comment even shorter. But I'm equally disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed with Fishbein's choice to vote, presumably vote to not overturn this veto, but also to kind of attribute that to the amendment for the pool, because that was not his position, at least last week. But now that we've seen the mill rate pretty clearly shown as a decrease in front of us, I think it is really hard to argue that the proposed budget would not result in lower taxes than the original budget would. On top of that, the phrase that we've heard over the past 2 years about the pool, everyone apparently being in support of the pool, but it just not being the right time. My question is, and this is more of a comment, I understand, is when will the right time be? Because we've only seen that it's gotten more and more expensive with each passing year. And more importantly, as this amendment in the budget goes, this only earmarks that money, or at least the argument that's made against it is that it would be left with all this other earmarked money untouchable over time. But if we really believe the pool will happen eventually, that concern really just doesn't hold up. And so if I just want everyone here to be completely honest with each other, and that a vote against overturn this veto, straightforward, is a vote against the pickle courts. It's a vote against a decrease in the mill rate, as we've already seen tonight and last week. And it's a vote against any future at any time for a community pool. I really do think it's as simple as that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for getting me in under the wire there.
Thank you. We are out of time for public comment. Back to the council. First on the council, Councilor Morgenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of my statements have been made. I wanted to be sure in the discussion about the use of federal money. I may have misheard. I believe I now think that the mayor understands that we can't be using federal money as saving money elsewhere or as a fund against harder times. Actually, I think we've had harder times. And so, yes, Councillor Tata's decrease in the mill rate, and then we as a community offering the community some things to come back from this pandemic with are the reasons for the council's amending of the budget in the way that it has been amended. And so, yeah, a vote for overriding the veto is a vote in favor of our community, helping them in these hard times, both financially and bringing back some community. And so I would definitely encourage that we override this veto. Thank you.
Councilor Fishbein.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I just want to clear up a misconception. Pickleball and the improvements to Harrison Park that are contemplated by the town council budget are not hampered by the town council budget not passing. That is just not factually accurate. And, I feel it important to correct the record. The fact of the matter is that, community pool itself has not been an expense over the last few years. There's been a savings, a loss to our community, but also a savings in that there hasn't been an expenditure for operation and things like that. That money ostensibly has existed. It presently exists in the cap and non-recurring budget. And as Councilor Tata pointed out very eloquently, the overture for the Harrison Park situation doesn't impact the budget. So for one to say to us to me specifically, that if you vote against the override, that you're voting against pickleball is just not accurate. Next week, Park and Rec, through the mayor, can come to us and say, we'd like to take some money out of cap and non that's sitting there in reserves and do this project. That project doesn't even have to wait for the next budget. That is fact. That is the way our procedure works. So I just felt it necessary to clear up that misconception as to what the vote tonight would affect. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to use a movie reference. There's a great scene in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, when the Enterprise gets ambushed by the Reliant, which Khan has taken over. And so Kirk, Admiral Kirk is trying to get some time, extra time. So Khan gives him a minute, and Admiral Kirk comes up with this plan to basically hack into Reliant's computer. Now, it's a 1982 movie. They don't, that I'm using a term, modern term. And there's a great moment when Lieutenant Savick, who's out of the academy, fresh out of the academy, doesn't understand what Kirk's trying to do. And Kirk is doing this, Spock gets it, and Kirk says, you have to learn why things work the way they do on a starship. It's a great line. I know I'm outing myself as a dork using this analogy, but there's just two comments I have to respond to that have been made. Because you have to learn how things work in town government and how things work with our charter. The pool. Look, I supported Councilor Testa's motion, and I'll support it tonight. But it is simply incorrect for anyone to say a vote to uphold the mayor's veto is a vote against the pool. That's wrong. That's not true. This has nothing to do. The pool is not going to get done or not get done based on what happens tonight. The only way the pool gets done is for the mayor to come back to the council with a request to put that out to bid again. That's how that works. That can happen anytime. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, and you're passionate like I am about the pool, don't get discouraged after the vote tonight, because you can keep writing letters and saying, you know, Mayor, it's time. Economic indicators are all, I mean, unemployment's down, the Dow is up, restaurant attendance is coming back. I mean, you could cite all sorts of reasons, but to argue that tonight's vote is somehow impacts the future of the pool is incorrect. No one should argue that. It reflects a misunderstanding of how things work. The second point is about pickleball. A vote tonight is a vote against pickleball. Let's talk this through for a minute. The town council does not have the authority in real time to access the budget. Let me say that again. The town council on its own does not have the authority to access a budget in real time. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that our window of opportunity with the budget is a 6-week window. It starts April 1 and it ends the second Tuesday in May, where we can make changes to the next budget that starts July 1. That's it. That's our authority. We never have authority in real time. Today's, like the budget we're in now, we don't have any authority. The mayor can come to us and request things. We can approve it or not approve it. We can go to the mayor and say, can you please request something? I mean, no one's saying that stuff can't happen, but we don't have the authority to do certain things. If you're a pickleball player and you're watching this or listening, and you were told by a town councilor, oh, the money's in the budget, don't worry about it. You were misled. You were told a half-truth. We can't access the money in the budget without the mayor coming to us and asking for it. That's why the money that we put aside, the Councilor Zandri motion, the first motion, that's why that was so important for next year. So anyone that tells you that oh, the money's there and we can't do anything about that unless the mayor wants to come to us. And look, we have some very strong-willed people in town government. Councilor Fishbein and Mayor Dickinson, they're a lot alike. We made a cut a year ago in the budget, a cut to the public works budget. And Rob Baltramitis, the director, could not buy a snowplow. He's still trying to buy his snowplow. If you think the mayor is just going to pull 60,000 out of the sky for pickleball, you're crazy. So I just, I want to set both of those things in context in light of some recent comments. And frankly, you know, the last thing I'll say is I don't view this as the choice between cutting the green wire or the red wire with a bomb. I mean, to me, the mayor's budget was pretty good. We made some changes. I don't think we're going to go off the fiscal cliff if our budget goes through, but I also don't think the taxpayers are going to be unduly burdened if the mayor's budget stands, with all due respect to both sides. And frankly, I call the question.
Been a motion to call the question. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded.
But we didn't even have a Facebook page for the start.
Hang on. All right. Madam Clerk.
Stellar people.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to call the question.
Yeah, he can be stubborn.
Okay, just a minute. Fishbein,
No.
So that's.
Yes.
Marone,
Hang on. Counselor Marone?
That was a yes for me.
See.
I got Marone's vote. Morgan,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
No.
Testa, Landry,
No.
Chairman Cervoni.
I vote yes. Let me just, Counselor Testa, can you register your vote?
I don't know if you can hear me or not. Can you?
I had you muted with all the telephone callers, so your vote is
Oh,
now
okay. I
motion to call the question.
had muted myself. And then when I unmuted, I got nervous because you weren't hearing me. I didn't realize you muted me. This is a vote to call the question.
Yes.
I vote yes.
Got it.
The motion carries. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the veto motion.
Fishbein,
Pass.
No.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Morgenstein, you're muted.
A lot of background noise. So a yes is vetoing the mayor, a no is, which is it, please?
A yes is overturning the veto.
I vote yes. Thank you.
Short,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni,
Back to Counselor Fishbein.
Fishbein votes yes.
I vote no. The motion carries.
Well done.
That is all regarding item number 3. On to item number 4, which is a presentation from GotSpace LLC regarding the possible development of data centers in Wallingford. Those who are here, are you going to present media? And if you could tell me who I should designate as your media presenter.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Len Fasano, and I will start the presentation. And Mr. Chairman, member of the council, with me through this medium is Mr. Quinn, who is the spokesman and person in charge of Got Space LLC. So if I could start, and then I would turn it over to Mr. Quinn.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, once again, my name is Len Fasano, law practice in New Haven, Fasano, Ippolito, Lee, and Florentine, 388 Orange Street. I'd like to back up and just start as to how this whole thing kind of began. The legislature passed House Bill 6514 through the House and the Senate. It actually went through emergency certification, if I remember correctly. And what it does is it gives a business advantage to get data centers created here in Connecticut. And what a data center is they're called qualified data centers, and I'll refer to them as data centers. And what they are, it's just a building that houses these network computers that are in a physical location for central storage, management, and dissemination of data or information. And in order to get these going, and this was inspired by the Economic Development Commissioner, David Lehman, also obviously supported by the Governor Lamont and bipartisanly throughout the legislature. And it gives certain tax incentives. There's exemptions for sales and use tax, certain transactions, the state usually tax, which makes it exempt. And there's also a property, personal and real exemption for municipalities that enter into a hosting agreement, which we'll get to in a few moments. There's within the legislation, it talks about a clawback provision, which is in the event that there's a violation of the hosting agreement, one form or the other. There are clawbacks that allows the state and the municipality to get whatever it is that they gave up, get that back as a penalty, plus additional penalties. So that can be written into an agreement. These are generally 20 to 30 year investments. And the reason why it's that extended period of time is obviously you want to recoup the capitals. These are significant investments on the size. And if you read the legislation, a minimum of 50 million up to 200 million. So we're talking about a significant development. If the town is so inclined to do it, there's a hosting agreement. The hosting agreement is something that's negotiated with the town for fees and a variety of other obligations that municipality looks at. These are overseen and reviewed by DECD. So Connecticut is going to set up the Office of Data Infrastructure Administration and Security, which is within DECD. So they'll be the liaison, they'll be the overseer, they'll make sure that these data centers all comply with the laws and regulations set up by the state. They'll also help out towns should they have questions about these things. But basically, it's a fee agreement that's negotiated by the town. Now, the policy reason for these is to further investments in the state of Connecticut, to enrich towns by these fee agreements, hosting agreements, which are fee-based. And also because, look, it's tough to do business in the state of Connecticut. It just is. It's not a political statement, it's a factual statement. So the question is, with this rising technology that we're displaying here today and that we have across the country, and it's getting more and more important, it is the opportunity for Connecticut to be a hub in this area because of its uniqueness. In particular, there's a uniqueness to here in Wallingford. We all know Wallingford's a great town. It's a wonderful community. It's got a great tax base, but it also has its own electric company with a significantly reduced electrical bill relative to those that don't own their own electrical companies. I may add there are a few other towns in the state of Connecticut equally true who have that benefit. But Wallingford even has more of a unique benefit. One, it's centrally located. Number two, there are fiber optics in the area, which Mr. Quinn will talk about the importance of that. You've got major highways running through Wallingford. All these benefits are unique to Wallingford, but not unique to this council that I know you and I know you know about these things. So the idea is that there's a lot of land available in other towns as well who are doing these who own their own electric companies. But there's only a certain amount of power that's available for data centers. So there's a limited amount of power. So there's more land than there is power, which means that those towns that already signed an agreement and are going forward, and there's a few, companies are probably going to start to look, or are looking now, and more likely than not, will look at areas that have agreements already done. And if that energy gets used up, those who haven't gotten that far may not be able to conclude their deal. But here's the key. The key to this legislation is the state set up the tax implications and the ability of towns to not go after real estate tax in lieu of a fee-based municipality agreement, but it's under total local control. The town is going to control, by virtue of people coming to the hearings, how these things are going to be built, the way they're going to look, and all the safeguards. That's 100% relegated to the town. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to Tom Quinn, who could talk a little bit more about the practical building and the aesthetics and the issues that the town will have 100% control over. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn the microphone to Mr. Quinn.
Certainly. Mr. Quinn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I reside in Warwick, Rhode Island. I'm originally from Hartford and lived in Connecticut in the early years. I did a lot of real estate development work out in Massachusetts. When we started on the pathway to this project, we moved between our real estate assets, and we should have probably kept going all the way into Connecticut to be shorter driving for me. But I've been in the development business 35 years. We have a team at GotSpace Data of approximately 20 consultants on our team. We were instrumental in proposing the legislation for the state from the very first day, and we're successful with a big majority vote, House and Senate. We believe that we have a good opportunity here in Connecticut to bring forward what would be considered a new corridor for data in the region. Just a couple of little items. There are some major hubs for data around the country. In Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, there are no hyperscale data centers whatsoever. At some point, we're going to need to have some data here because it's a blank. New England is the size of Ireland, for example, and there's a number of data centers in Ireland. It's a good hub. The reason I tell you that is because of connectivity. New England's got pretty quick connectivity to the overseas lines, which actually leave New Jersey, but there's a new one now, Google brought in, out of Boston. So we're getting in the middle. The latency, which is the round trip delay of signal, is getting a little bit better. I saw this coming for the last few years and positioned ourselves in the company and legislation and so forth to be able to attract these larger data center customers to the state. There are 4 things that you need to require to get data customers to be able to come. They're not standing in line, waving a flag to come in. I've traveled all over the country and in Europe, courting certain data companies for the last couple of years. I will tell you that you need to solve for regulation, taxes, cost of utility, and fiber. If any of those things don't work, you don't have an opportunity to do that. So going into, thank you, Len, thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members. Going into this piece, I'd like to talk a little bit about the land control. This hosting agreement we're looking for the town would allow us to come into Wallingford and start our pathway to furthering electrical infrastructure engineering and actual land use. All of this that we're working on tonight doesn't exempt the town from doing anything that they normally do or any zoning requirements they have or any of those things. I can tell you that there's been some comments about height and aesthetics and noise and so forth, so I will address those. We are proposing across the board at this point, 2-story buildings. These buildings are about 35 feet tall. These buildings have integrated design systems, so you don't see any mechanical entities from the street. These are all built into the building, and I'll explain a little more about that in a minute. It's like any other approved zoning project in an industrial area where we'd be able to come before the board with a plan to show you what they look like. These are boxy buildings. They usually have offices and some glass entryway in the front. The mechanicals will be set toward the back of the building, if we can call it the back, or the hidden side of the building, and they're behind parapet walls and enclosures. These buildings are high security buildings. They'll be fenced. They have infrared technology and biometric security to get into these buildings. So it's a very secure and quiet facility. A lot was talked about where we're going to put these. We are suggesting to put them in land we've contracted in industrial zone areas. Most of the land that we've contracted is what we would consider buildable. We do need to meet national deltas, just like with the tax incentive law and the power calculations. We do need to provide a large piece of land. This is what companies like all the major names that you know and use every day on your computer are looking for. 120 acre parcels approximately is where they want to start. They like the privacy. A lot of the land will be left untouched. A single large building on a 100-acre parcel will cover 6 or 7%, including parking and roadways. So if you have 2 buildings on that site, we're still well under. We don't intend to clear trees or do anything else outside of that area. Everything else would be left in a natural state, subject to, of course, planning and zoning regulations. The town has no obligation to upgrade sewers. That would be on the development side, or any electrical infrastructure whatsoever. The town wouldn't have to be concerned about road use and road damage. The road would be bonded, the building would be bonded, the finance for the project is bonded, the entire package is bonded, all put together. These jobs are, these builds rather, are considered controlled jobs, as you would be building a much larger commercial building in like a city environment area. And they're run by top-level engineers and architects, and it won't tax the building department, although they will get their full fees, and so will fire protection get their full fees. It should be a fairly reasonable process there, and these engineers sign off on all the liability parts of the go forward in the permitting process. If there was a particular customer that wanted to joint venture with us, that wanted any more than the height that we talked about, this agreement doesn't exempt us from any of that. We'd have to come in and ask. A lot of it would, I'm sure, be related to topography. I will tell you nationally that 2 stories is not the average. It's higher than the average. Most are 1 story, but because of the size of land available in Connecticut, we propose 2 stories. Only in the Far East are we seeing buildings with multiple stories. They just don't, they don't do it. Let's see. There was a big discussion about generators, noise, and what this all means. So I'd like to get into that for a minute. So generators are necessary. They're necessary for 2 things. One is peak shaving, and the other is emergency backup. These generators run far less than 1% a year at max, and they would need to because they're considered by DEEP as a minor source generation. So there'll be very strict controls. We have agreed to provide Tier 4 generators across the board. Kohler makes one, for example, and other companies do that are very efficient. They come up quickly. They take load quickly. They're the latest and greatest of the generators out there. We will need quite a few of these generators to back up in case a data center goes down. These generators are housed in half-inch thick, roughly, steel containers that are baffled. These containers have baffle levels, and we can meet all, and I've written this to the town and given them that's this information that we can meet all the current zoning and probably exceed it related to the noise ordinance in any of the areas of town. These generators are off almost all the time. Last year, we had a very strange year with COVID, but had we peak shaved in COVID, we would have had these on for just 12 hours, and it would have been in the summer months. They would have been off the rest of the year, except for 1 hour a month of testing. There are air conditioner systems that run. They are not exposed. They're behind parapet walls, and those too will meet the decibel levels that are required by the town at all times. Let's see what else here. Emergencies and storms, of course, we'd have to have these generators on. There will be very little generation whatsoever in the winter months. If you look at the Wallingford utility schedule for their peak shaving, and other towns like Groton, Basra, Griswold, and so forth, other towns that peak shave, we've studied those. We've also done 20-year studies on power and so forth. It is inefficient for us to use generators. It costs a fortune to do it. So we want to buy utility off the grid as much as we possibly can, only just to shave the peaks as necessary. It's a point of diminishing returns you get to very quickly. So the building that themselves, they are big box buildings. We can make them any color you'd like to blend into the landscape. The parking is interesting. It's not like a mall where you'd have, a 300,000 or 800,000 square foot operation with 20 acres of parking. You don't need that. You need about an acre and a half of parking. Another thing necessary to know is we'd like to have an additional acre in there, and we can do it with impervious pavers and grow grass through it, because every 3 years a team comes in, a regional team comes in, and some that are from further away, and that team replaces all of the servers in the building. It's a multi-month process, up to 6 months. When they come in, they stay in in hotel facilities and so forth, and they have to go through the process of bringing up one rack at a time and testing it and putting it online and removing the next rack. It does take months to do this. It's a standard in the industry. This is why the use tax portion of what the legislature voted for is so important, and attracts data users because we didn't create it, but 34 states now have data tax laws. A 35th is coming on now. So we're trying to follow the national market metrics to make it attractive enough to be able to bring customers and JV partners that we have now to Wallingford if we can make the numbers work. Let's see. The amount of power. Data centers draw an awful lot of power. There's no question about it. We will need to take from the 345 after electrical engineering is done. We will use Wallingford electrical engineer team and whoever they subcontract to and pay those bills to be able to get what we need. We will tell you that the sticks and wires pathways, so the general site that we're in, is currently installed, carrying less load. So we'd have to upgrade the infrastructure there to be able to do it, but it's not a far run. What's very nice about the Wallingford area is it has a close to main trunk fiber benefit. So you have fiber down 91, main trunk is 95. You have Windstream and all of the other major carriers. Windstream links Boston to Hartford to New York. We have a good chance at being able to discuss attracting probably about 90 to 93% of the market. There are just some people that won't come for a number of reasons, which we don't have to get into, but some of them require 1 millisecond latency, which is that round trip to New York, and will not take less. But I will tell you that we believe we're approximately 2 second, 1.75 to 2. It's measured differently with different companies, but it's very close to those numbers. So I think we'd be pretty competitive. And in the latency, so the company will upgrade and harden the electrical grid in the areas. We will need substations on the same 100-acre parcels, roughly 100 to 120 acre parcels we have. And we will upgrade the fiber lines to the main trunk infrastructure as need be. Let's see what I have for you in the next stop, so I don't take a whole lot of your time here. So the power, these data centers, so that, I can't tell you exactly what size they're going to all be and exactly what footprint, but the data centers run, we call it the Big Mac of data centers, is a 32 megawatt data center. It draws 32 megawatts on an annual basis. It's a very large electric bill. We believe that, as we have in other towns, that Wallingford will strongly benefit with no cost against the utility, but they will act as the provider for us and the asset manager for us to bring the utility to us. Security is very important in speaking with the town. I can assure you that the major hyperscalers that we're talking to now, and some of the large colos, they understand that security is important. These electrical bills are often paid every Friday, and there's security ahead up to a month in advance in a cash bond, and then they also provide letter of credits. These are all AAA rated companies. Plus, and Wallingford, we've asked Wallingford for a term sheet, but the contract itself will come when we go through the permitting process, and Wallingford can put those credit restrictions as they need to in each and any of those documents as we come forward. Let's see, the municipal hosting fee. This is important. When I told you about regulation, taxes, cost of utility, and fiber, what we've done in creating the legislation, working with DECD and George Jepson on the original drafts, was to bring in power consultants from a few states. Our main power consultant is in Fort Lauderdale, and we had to figure out where the deltas are. It's no use all of us going through all this work and not having anybody come. So what we had to do is lock down the trade-offs. For example, in Massachusetts, very high cost of power, no municipalities there. The power cost is $15 or $17 million more per year per building. So that's a non-starter over Connecticut. But we also have to make sure that Connecticut qualifies against the national markets. And to do that, and to know that the town needs to get paid some pilot payment, although we don't call it that in the legislation, it comes from management fees of the operator. The town gets it's in negotiation now, not finalized, they'll get a host fee agreement, and they'll then get the benefit, which could well exceed the value of the host fee agreement in power final mile pricing. So without getting into too many details in the weeds, a 32 megawatt building has a very substantial benefit. If you combine the hosting agreement and the utility agreement, a single building could generate a few $1 million a year, between $3 and $4 million a year for a town at 32 megawatts. We're hoping that we can get through a process and get a few of these buildings approved on contracted land. I've been in the development game a long time. I've done many hundreds of meetings with towns, as Len has, and I can tell you that we understand that we need to set these buildings back in a certain way. We need to be very conservative about how we and where we place the electrical components, and then we put the substations in the back. that we leave a nice facade from the street, that the road is bonded, that the sewer is extended, and that those things are all done without having Wallingford spend any money. You'll find across the industry, this is part of the development process because of the size of the buildings. A couple more small things. The capacity is such that we'll have on-site managers. We will have a jobs creation here. These buildings are going to service so many people in the building, outside of the building, maintenance to the building. There'll be induced jobs. There'll be supply chain jobs. We have signed project labor agreements. It's necessary to use union labor. This is a huge job. It's going to require quite a large component of mobilization to pour these foundations and build the infrastructure. We do have a few other towns that we are working in. I named them. We've gotten a lot of cooperation. We hope to create a corridor. Data centers have gravity. If you look to see what happened in North Virginia, Dallas, Austin, Atlanta, Phoenix, Sacramento, once you have a data center come in, especially a large scale data center, and we do have a very large scale data center that we're talking to now, more than one, but one particularly big one. These data centers have gravity. They'll bring other types of businesses in, support services for these businesses. We saw in North Virginia, they brought in things like microchip manufacturing. They brought in AI research. It's good to be close to a data center because the latency is fast. Look, Wallingford is we know it's a great town. It's a close community. I've spent a little time down there. I've met with a lot of the sellers of property. I've spent time with Len learning more about the town. We even have an attorney that works in the town that's handling many of our real estate contracts, not only there, but in other places. We appreciate the time you spent with us today, and I'm available for questions if you'd like to start.
Well, since you've opened yourself up to grilling, we'll start with the council. Any members of the council have questions for our presenters? If not, then I will go out to the public. Mr. Bradley, I've got you asking 3 times. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Ed Bradley, 2 Hampton Trail, town of Wallingford. And I have questions and comments. I've spent, now retired, 50 years in the EDP field. Several of those years have been planning disaster recovery, managing them, planning them for large corporations. Preferably in New Haven. I'm sure Mr. Quinn is familiar with Condisco down at the time. I don't know if they're still there. Located in the Meadowlands by Giant Stadium in New Jersey. And there's a reason why that industry, as well as some others, not all, are located in areas like that. What I will say is that the data centers being proposed and those that were in existence in my career, they're clean industry, but they do have issues that come along with them. Some of what Mr. Quinn has mentioned, and I refer to them as they did back in the day as disaster recovery centers. In other words, those buildings are empty warehouses, if you can picture it, or if you've seen pictures of them, with cages. And within those cages are just hundreds of servers, networking equipment, and other things. Different corporations do have their own servers that they rely on in case of a national disaster that they can use and fall back on. Other companies will lease equipment from the vendor. And what we're seeing in the industry today, over 50%, I don't know what the actual number is, has become reliant on these facilities in the event of a national disaster. Mr. Quinn did mention they use a lot of electricity. Yeah, they use a ton of electricity. That'll be a burden. I'm not going to get into detail with our electric division. The generators, some, I think Mr. Quinn mentioned that, and if I'm wrong, correct me, that the generators, 32 megawatt, are housed inside and are baffled. Now, comes with those generators, I'm assuming that they're going to require diesel fuel. A question for Mr. Quinn, where would the diesel fuel, if required by these generators, be stored?
Good question, Mr. Bradley. And I'm getting that a lot because Connecticut is always near a waterway, we say. It's always near some inland waterway. So here's how it works now. And if you, I'll just throw this out to you, anybody that's listening. If you Google New Albany, Ohio, Facebook, and you look from the Google Earth picture down, it'll tell you the story. So what you do with these data centers, picture the box, picture a Costco box, only much more attractive than Costco, and a lot smarter too. And in back of the Costco box, there is the equivalent of a gunite swimming pool that runs a couple 100 feet down through the length, the width of a trailer. You'll see this. And then next to that is the storage. So it's about a 10 or 12 to 1. It's all contained in one big area, and this is standard now in the industry. It's the least expensive, most cost-effective way to build it, and it contains any possibility of spill within this gunite type structure. So there is a line that penetrates the wall to fill the tank from the outside, but once it's inside this contained area, each of these generators are there. Now, these aren't the generators that you see in any of the towns that are municipal utilities that peak shave. And those generators are rather dinosaurs compared to what we have today, which are peak 4 generators. These generators, when you take a diesel generator and turn it on, it takes a long time to warm it up and get it up to full power. These generators are up to full power in less than 5 minutes, most of the power in 3 minutes and ready for some load. Now, how do they do that? They actually use a little natural gas now. They burn natural gas with diesel to get things hot and moving quickly. So they're very efficient. They're fully contained in this, we'll call it like a gunite pool, sealed in, and they're all in a line. So if you Google any data center and look from Earth down that's been built in the last, I would say 10 years, you'll see this type of a design.
Okay, let's talk about AC noise, the hum of the chillers, compressors, cooling towers. People I know that are located near some of these facilities across the country complain about those sounds. Will we expect the same?
Okay, very good question too. So that's the reason that these following things are done. So first of all, the size of the land is a big piece. And that's what these hyperscale data, and this is what this is designed about. Len said the investment was 200 million, but the second level of investment is 400 million. And that's going to be to the go-to in Wallingford, because for 200 million, you can't afford to build a 32 megawatt building. Having said that, you have a big piece of land, the buildings get set back. The air conditioners are behind parapet walls throughout and will fully conform to all the noise or exceed the noise ordinance as it is. And we will try to exceed it if possible. There was a lot of complaints from people because they were using older grade. The federal government has changed multiple times, has changed the way air conditioners are built to be more efficient. And with that, they became quieter. So even for residential use. So these are much quieter than you see. We will provide all of the decibel levels. We will comply or it won't be built. We will bring in the sound engineers. We'll bring in the engine manufacturers. They will be able to measure, the decibels from 5 feet all the way out. It's a science project, and all of that will be done before a shovel goes in the ground and approved and signed off by, the engineer that handles that noise attenuation. So you are correct. It was a big concern for years. You have to remember, even if you go down Norwalk Way, you'll see a metal building with a single 10 meg generator out back with no container around it. The building's just metal. It's loud, it's noisy, the air conditioners are on the roof, and it's it's not attractive. I will also tell you, because I got a question about the venting or the smokestack portion. We have agreed with DEEP. It is going to come up and be tacked onto the legislation that we will keep the smokestacks, they call it, or any venting for these generators at a height of 34 feet. Here's how this is done. You don't see a smokestack. Picture that Costco box and picture the container, the size of a tractor trailer with the generator in it, pushed right up to the building. That stack or that generation piece goes into the building, and it goes up inside the building and comes out on the parapet wall air conditioning level, plenty far away from the air conditionings. These are very large buildings. So that's how that's handled. So what you see from the outside is a clean, quiet facade, and we'll be sure that we do everything we can with planning and zoning to back these buildings as far back on the land. And these are some good pieces of land we have. Back them up as with with the cooperation of P&Z, and we'll get them as quiet as you can. There are levels of baffling. I will tell you, I've studied New Jersey with the sound attenuation people. New Jersey's extremely tough, the new buildings, because of that, because they had these issues. You can look this up online. And now they have the highest and best baffling systems used down there to keep everything quiet. I know that was a long answer to your question, but I wanted to get it all to you.
No, that's
And
fine.
Mr. Chairman, if I just may add, I just want to remind those who are listening is that all these plans, should the council go forward with this eventually, all these plans would go through the rigors of local, state agencies, federal if required, depending on what's being used, and all noise ordinance. The burden would be on the plan submitted to planning and zoning that we've met or would meet or exceed all the regulations that the town has in the town of Wallingford. So that would be plenty of time for these questions to be asked as the plans develop in front of them.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'm not going to get into detail because I can get into a lot of detail with regulations and everything. I'm trying to just keep it on the surface here. But I want to talk, at least get in land use. Your two maps, Site 1, Site 2, are close to residential areas. Site 1 in particular, RU40 and RU18. I mean, you're right on the back of residential areas. And that area, I don't know why he's ever picked Site 1. Site 1 is the Water Protection District of Wallingford. and is so noted by our planning and zoning regulations. That site is within the watershed for Mackenzie Reservoir and is designated as a WPD by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Watershed protection regulations of the WPD are stated in section 413 of the zoning regulations. But just to highlight that area and the importance of it, Mackenzie Reservoir, which is located, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles downstream from your site. The Muddy River would run right through your site, has the largest watershed of the town's 4 public supply reservoirs. And the tributary area to Mackenzie accounts for approximately 75% of the total watershed area tributary to the reservoir system and provides 94% of the town's drinking water supply. So my question is, why did you ever pick site number 1?
Mr. Bradley, it's an industrial zoned area. That's one reason. The second reason is generators are allowed there if fuel containment is handled in a responsible way, and I've explained how that was going to be handled. And third, we intend to work with the town through the planning process and be set back, which we have to do. We've also done quite a bit of homework up at the state level too, to be set back at least 400 feet or approximately 400 feet, close to that, from the reservoir. So we'll have full containment. It will not be a future site of a questionable type of business. It'll be a cleaned, contained, simply run, no discharge facility. It can be there. In fact, these are located in and around similar situations all over the country. It requires strict engineering. There will be strict engineering. These companies are spending upwards of $300 million, and all of that for a 32 megawatt building. Some estimates with labor costs in Connecticut are running $330 million per building. So there will be the best of the best when it comes to that. Also, unlike other businesses that could come in and take down a lot of the site for trees, we're leaving almost everything except where we need our footprint area and our parking area. It's going to leave, if we build one building on 100 acres, and that site's not 100 acres, but I just have the number in my head, it would leave 94 acres roughly open, untouched. If there's a second building approved, we'd have to come to the town for that. That would be, let's say 12, and let's add a couple percent on there for roadway to 14%. Nowhere near what the zoning regulation requires, much, much less. So we're trying to have as little impact, as far away from the watershed. We didn't locate anything within that 400-foot setback, and the buildings are fully contained.
And Mr. Bradley, if I may, let me just say that the land that's acquired that we're showing on that site still needs to go through more detailed analysis, soil analysis, water analysis, and obviously inland wetlands and various other boards as well. Who knows, maybe in deep would have the ability to review. So it was a parcel that they were able to assemble, put under contract, and then subject to more analysis as it comes through the process. So it may not even look like what you're looking at, or it may be that it can't be done. We don't know. This is just the first inquiry because we're not even at the stage of having an understanding with the town yet. So not a lot of money's been spent there yet.
No, that's true, Mr. Fasano. I'm very very familiar with DEEP. I'm very familiar with our P&Z. I'm very familiar with our Inland Wetlands Commission. I'm pretty on top of all the rules and regulations. Just 2 things to wrap it up. As far in my opinion, the WPD area should always trump any industry that wants to locate in that area. I know the EDC is after tax dollars. And as I mentioned before several boards, that it would be in the best interest of the town, since that is a WPD district, to purchase that land from the landowners and keep it as open space, no development. Oh, one further question I have for Mr. Fasano. You mentioned something about state tax control.
So there's a sales tax exemption on certain transactions that take place within these data centers that normally are subject to tax. We tax internet stuff, for instance. And there's other transactions, and the state is exempt those transactions from being taxed if in fact we qualify under their rules as a data center.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Speaking with you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for giving me some time.
Yeah, someday you'll pay me back, Mr. Bradley.
Okay.
Next up, Ms. Stopa, your name and address for the record, please.
Charlotte Stopa, 1038 North Farms Road.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Quinn, I have a few questions and concerns regarding your Site 2 plan. I live on North Farms Road, close to the area that you're looking to build. And I was wondering if you could please confirm if your plans for Site 2 include a driveway and entrance on North Farms Road.
Okay, I need to pull up my Site 2. Hold on a minute. Working on it now.
And also other driveways or entrances that you are looking to have.
Well, we're trying to stay off North Farms Road, and there is a plan that is not online now. That is, we're trying to. We're not saying we can because we haven't gotten that far yet. What we're looking for from the town is an invite to the town. So there's only so much that we have done to this level, but we do have a new plan that's a compilation plan. We didn't put it online yet because of contractual obligations that weren't satisfied. They are now, so we just got this done. And we intend to try to make an internal roadway through that larger site to take the traffic off that road. That's what we're trying to do, and that will come out a little more through planning and zoning. But I want to tell you about the traffic itself. These buildings operate 24 hours a day. Unlike other concerns you have with other large companies that I know you're working through now, there's going to be approximately 85 jobs in a 32 megawatt building spread over 3 shifts. So you're only talking about 1/3 of that many cars every 8 hours coming and going to the site. So traffic shouldn't be a big concern. Yes, there will be construction. Construction lasts approximately 18 months from, depending on the site plan work, it could last a little bit longer, but they're usually the critical development schedule, contracted and bonded for hyperscale data centers is 18 months. So there will be some discomfort, and then there'll only be just a few cars that run to a particular data center. Now that doubles if we build 2 data centers. You'll then have 50 cars every 8 hours on the road. I don't think it will be overloading that particular roadway, but we're also going to provide these numbers to P&Z.
Okay, are there going, I'm
just
sorry.
wanted to chime in for a quick second. We recognize that that is an issue. Mr. Quinn has talked about that being an issue, what you're talking about, that driveway portion coming out in that road. So we are trying to figure out other alternatives, and if possible, we are going to approach those other alternatives.
Okay, so Mr. Quinn, your new plans, when they are posted, they will show what entrances you have proposed other than North Farms Road?
They will show, this is without, so So think about where we are for a minute. I don't have the invite yet to Wallingford, and we're still trying to go through generations of plans. So yes, we will post them. And you are welcome to give me your direct comments. I have no problem, or through the planning chair, I mean, through the town council chairman, or through Lynn. I'm happy to take it directly. We will try to do everything we can to make it as comfortable as possible for everyone. So if we can move a road, we will do it. If we can move a building, we will do it. In another town, I'll tell you, we had a pastor said that he owned a strip of land we're 600 feet away from the property. But we moved the building another 100 feet. Why? Because we had enough land to be able to do it. And we have some of that opportunity in Wallingford. So I will work with you as best we can to make everybody that's along in that region comfortable. I think the traffic is going to be okay and fairly inconsequential, but we will try to get the traffic off North Farms Road. And if we can't get it all off North Farms Road, we'll make a construction entrance with town's permission from another angle to see if we can soften the experience of getting this built.
Okay, because coming from me, someone who lives on North Farms Road, there is a lot of traffic already. Tractor trailers overflow from Research Parkway. We have the school buses that come through off of Northrop Road. All the school buses, when they go out to pick up the kids, are going out there. So, believe it or not, any extra traffic will be a lot. And North Farms Road is not a wide road. That the section where you are looking to build is pretty narrow. I mean, when my children are getting on the bus, it's tight. With the cars stopping in both directions or people passing by, it can be very tight. My next question is, you were stating that you're looking to build all your buildings far away from site and from residential areas, but I'm noticing in your site 2 plans that building number 5 is very close to my neighbors across the street at 1043 North Farms Road. It's basically right in their backyard. So I'm just wondering if building number 5 is absolutely, if you do build, will building number 5 really be in that location when there's other open spaces in that whole area that look untouched?
Okay, that's a good question. So I want you to realize that we put things online because we have created a data tax incentive, and we've got a lot of land under contract, and we've done a lot of engineering, but nothing is set in stone, including that building. So if we have the ability to move a building, and I just explained we did in Groton, we are happy to move it as far away or however it makes it comfortable. Now, if we could, we're going to have a situation here where we have a tenant comes in, we build a building for them, and it's double a 32 megawatt building. So 2 would be put together. Yes, we would have to relocate it then, and we would move things around. There is nothing set in stone. The planning board has not adjudicated these plans. In fact, we haven't had one meeting with them. These are all just simply conceptual plans. So it would be a good idea. You can let me know your concerns. You can come to the planning and zoning meetings, and we will do everything we can. We have a wonderful engineer, Jim Rossman. He's out of New London. He's very sensitive. He's got a load of experience, and he's very easy to deal with. They know him from meetings that we've had in town. And, we'd be happy to work with you on those things. Look, I don't want, I have adult kids. I had these same concerns in all our development projects, and we're sensitive to it. So I'll do everything I can to work with you to make sure that we move these buildings in the most advantageous position. We are not forced to put them anywhere in particular on the site, as long as the planning board, works with us on that, and I'm sure they will. We'll try to keep them as far away back from residential properties as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Quinn. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Cohan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Cohan, Whispering Pines Drive. And for full disclosure, I am currently sitting on planning and zoning, so I will not be asking any land use questions here. And additional full disclosure, I've had 40 plus years in information technology, so I'm extremely familiar with what goes into a data center. And I won't be asking any of those questions at this point either. Well, I do have several concerns. And my first question is, how do you currently have an application pending with planning and zoning? Or do you have to get town council approval before you can go to planning and zoning to submit?
So let me,
If you don't mind.
I'll tell you why we're doing it this way. When we were in proposing legislation, if you know a little of the background, you'll understand why this is not the usual course. When we went through the legislature, we ended up with, CCAT, CBIA, and we got over to CCM, Connecticut Council on Municipalities, and they said, hey, look, we want you to go and get a hosting agreement first and get an invite from the town. That's what this is really all about. So what we've done in hopes to be accepted with the invite is we've made some plans up and we posted them for marketing purposes because the industry is up 20% last year. We want to make sure we have opportunity in Wallingford, and it's going to take a lot to get permits in rapid order to put this together. So we're trying to move this as quickly as possible. We have not applied, unless my engineer did this week, Rossman did, I don't think he did with anything. We've done soil samples on 3 sites in town, and we've started some preliminary phase 1, phase 2 work.
Excuse me, that's really not the gist of my question. What I'm asking is, what is the process you're going through to allow the town to, invite you? Do you have to get approval from town council? Part of my issue is a couple of concerns that you mentioned, and I think the town council and the mayor needs to understand this, that you don't have any customers right now. You're doing this on spec, right? How old is your company?
We have a young company. We have 2 JV agreements under NDA, and these are major worldwide known companies. We have a half a dozen co-location companies we're working with right now. During COVID, I traveled to 7 cities and put together a coalition so we could gain some interest in Connecticut.
So, Mr. Cohen, let me help clarify a little bit here, if I may. So
Mr. Fasano, let me get to the gist of my question. The concern I have with this company is, number one, it is a startup. What I heard at the beginning is the town has to negotiate some type of host fee with you, and you're also asking for a letter of credit from the town, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, to get this in operation.
No, that's absolutely wrong.
Tom, let me just take this.
I'm sorry you misunderstood that. That was my fault then. Perhaps. No, the letter of credit was in our negotiations earlier on with the town. The town doesn't want to be on the hook, and shouldn't be, for any utility bills whatsoever. And we've all seen the problem with Eversource in the state, owed $500 million or close now. So what's going on is we're trying to get this, the agreement set up, and there is nothing to do with a letter of credit from the town whatsoever. And by the way, every data operation in a new territory is considered a startup nationally.
So let me just answer, Mr. Cohen, let me just set it all out for you, please. So what happens is, we are talking to people. There is a hosting agreement that's being negotiated real time with the town through mayor's office and town attorney, dealing with money issues and structural issues. The town council at some point in time will have the opportunity, and they're in the negotiations as well, will have the opportunity to look at that agreement, and the public will see it in its final form, and there will be a vote on that agreement. And then from there, that would be approved by DECD, which then allows the tax advantages to take place. If DECD doesn't approve this, that group that I mentioned earlier, under DECD, then there is nothing here. So there's a bunch of steps that have to go through to make sure it works. With respect to the line of credit, letter of credit, whatever, it is protection against the town because these facilities buy a lot of power and they have to make sure that that bill is going to be paid. So it isn't a line of credit from Wallingford. It is a security agreement to ensure that the power is always going to have money to pay for it. Should there be a default on a payment, there's money and the town could pull on that money. So they're not in any jeopardy. That's part of the agreement. So it's multiple faceted to protect the town, but you can't go out and make firm deals with other folks. And this is true throughout the country until you get these other spots in place, because you can't tell somebody, yeah, we're good to go. So that's what we're waiting for, is this understanding. If we could get there with the town and approved by town council, that allows us to say, yes, we have people, but that doesn't mean we haven't done preliminary conversations. And they're looking at other towns and looking at Wallingford. But as Mr. Quinn suggests, Wallingford is a more desirable place for the reasons Mr. Quinn stated earlier.
Okay, I'm not going to belabor this point, but you know, I still don't understand who is supplying that letter of credit. And again, you know, the host fee payment, I don't want the town to be on the hook for what was that building we had up on off of 68 that we built and never got
the real estate one.
Yeah, I don't want to have the town get in a situation like that. If, you know, we put all the infrastructure in place, you don't get a tenant, and, you know, we're, you know, on the hook. You know, I frankly, I went out to your website and, you know, tried to do some research, and, you know, there's very little detail about, you know, your organization. You know, you click on the About tab, and basically you get a request to send an email. There's no information on, you know, your company and, you know, where you are with, you know, your progress. And again, full disclosure, I was the one that actually recommended, you know, bringing data centers into our industrial zone. That was not in our regulations, and I suggested that. So again, that letter of credit is a concern. How you structure, and again, I think the town council needs to be aware of this, that host fee agreement. You know, I'll reserve my editorial comment on that. But
I'd like to leave with a clear understanding. The town isn't on the hook for any sewer upgrades, or any power upgrades, or anything to do with fiber upgrades, for anything to do with road expansion, a traffic light if needed, a stripe on a road. The town pays zero, absolutely zero. The developer pays all expenses. This isn't because I'm offering, it's because it's standard nationally on every single deal. It's a responsibility of the developer to do it. And we have people coming, looking at sites now, and they understand the process. This is how it is. So the town doesn't have to bond anything. They don't have to participate in anything to do with it. If for any reason, and I can hear what you're asking, there is a failure of a project, but you should look up data centers. It's 20% up last year, one of the most stable industries in the world at this point. In fact, it's rated #1. If there is a problem, there's a clawback provision, which means all the taxes are due, and not at discounted rates, all of the taxes are due. And the town would be left with an upgraded electrical infrastructure, upgraded fiber, upgraded everything. But I will tell you, this is institutional funds, and at $300 million and $300 million in servers, no one's going into this lightly. Every part of the deal is bonded, from the road we drive over, not on the site, coming up to the site, any work, any damage done to the road, all this is bonded right into the door. The building's bonded and all of the financing's bonded. You can't tell me you've seen that in Wallingford before, because it doesn't exist. So this is a whole different industry. People don't know about it. We're trying to bring people forward. So that's a quick answer to your question. We appreciate the comments.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I think I'm done. And again, I do think this is a clean business, and all things considered, it would be something I think that would, be appropriate for Wallingford, and that's about all I can say since I'm on planning and zoning.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate your comments.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Christopher.
Yeah, my name's John Christopher, 15 Putter Drive. Mr. Quinn, you mentioned construction jobs sort of being brought to the area and using local firms. Where do you stand, or what's your position on professional services such as, engineering sub-consultants and all of those other professional services you need to construct a building? How do you contract those?
Okay. Well, you can contact me if someone's interested. They can contact me directly. I've gotten a number of people coming through the website, people that have been chasing me for more than a year, from rack manufacturers and so forth. Local, both is all local. We do have an engineer that we're happy with at this point, and survey crews that we're happy with. That phase 1, phase 2 environmental things we're happy with, but we haven't started construction. We have used Turner Construction, which is the largest data center building in the world. They have an office near you in Shelton. We have used them as our go-to. And the person that builds the biggest buildings in the world is Ben Kaplan. He's head of critical development at Turner, and he has been working with us for a couple of years. We have been feeding a lot of the leads through Turner. We're hoping they build the buildings. We haven't signed a contract with them yet, but we're in constant contact with them. But if there are certain local trades that are interested, that, I've told you I've signed project labor agreements, but if there are certain local trades, I'd be happy to talk about any of those opportunities for the tradesmen. They can contact me directly, either through the website, or they can have my phone number, and I'll be happy to provide my phone number if anyone would like it.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, Ms. Polanski.
Hi, I would just like to address a couple of things.
Name and
Just
address
first,
for the record, please.
Jessica Polanski, 1039 North Farms Road. As far as Mr. Quinn saying that his company likes privacy, I just want to make it abundantly clear that so do the residents in the surrounding area. So as far as I echo everything that Mr. Bradley said about concerns about the generator noise, because I've also done my research and have heard that these units in other areas have become problematic for residents. I want to echo what my neighbor Charlotte said about North Farms Road being extremely narrow. So much so that joggers cannot safely walk or jog on North Farms Road safely when traffic from both lanes approaches. You have to jump onto the greenery apron. It's not safe. It just isn't. So that's a serious concern as far as if you're going to have any entry, exiting or entryway on from North Farms Road, because I just don't see how it would be safe for any of the residents in the area. Also, as far as like light pollution, you had mentioned that, of course, there's a stringent security procedures put into place around these buildings. What would the light pollution at night be? I'm living at 1039. I am extremely concerned because I saw one set of plans where building 5 is literally diagonal to my property. And am I going to see that? It's a very, very serious concern for me. As far as you had just mentioned something about the town not being responsible for road expansion. What road expansion are you speaking of? Because that's
I have no plans to expand any road today. but I will tell you my experience when I've gone to towns. I have no interest in expanding North Farms Road, zero, none. I don't want to travel on North Farms Road if I don't have to. These are things that are addressed in the planning board process. Regarding lights, we don't need a single light on at this data center, but we're going to need some lights because your zoning will require it. This is all biometric security and infrared. It sees in the dark. So the back or three sides of the building where people don't have to walk in a lit front door can be pitch black. It's all infrared. So that's not a problem. And we'll have some low bollard lighting. There are 3 shifts. There is no reason to light the building up whatsoever. It's not a high rise with glass facade with lights in it. It's a dark, laid up, tilt up concrete type building. You'll be very happy with the renderings that we put together regarding light. Regarding access, I've said this already, and I'd like the opportunity to work with our engineers to try to make the residents of North Farms Road very satisfied that we've done everything we can in this industrial area to minimize the impact on any of the homes that are on the opposite side of the road. We are trying to get a road through, just in the last couple of days with engineers, to get a road through the center of this cluster of properties now that we have them all put together. We are certainly sensitive to that. I would suggest you come to the meetings. I suggest you follow through and continue to look at plans we post online. They will get better and better as we go forward. But once we get to the planning board, it's all up to them. So that's going to be the important meeting to come to. But I will do everything we can to minimize traffic on that road. I live on a road just like that with a stone wall on both sides of the road, so there's nowhere to go either. It's hard to pull out my driveway. So I appreciate the narrow road. I have been up North Farms Road many times. So I do
So that
understand.
you know what I'm
Thank you.
speaking of, because there is no extra room. When you have 2 people passing in both
I know
lanes.
exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. And as far as
I wouldn't jog on that road.
the one the plan that I saw with building 5, it's literally directly in my neighbor's backyard and adjacent to mine diagonally. And, you know, we also have concerns about, you know, what happens in the winter when foliage is cleared. Are we actually going to see this building?
Oh, I can't tell you from my computer in Warwick, Rhode Island, if you'll be able to see it, but these are things that will come through planning and zoning. You may see it, I don't know. And I'm not saying that that building is
Okay, well,
going to
that would be
stay
a
in that
problem.
exact location.
That would be a
It's gonna
serious
be-
problem.
It would be what?
I mean, that would be quite the problem to see a monstrosity of a building in your backyard.
Well, let me just say this. I mean, there are green shrubberies, the evergreens and things like that, that could be used as screening, and certainly we will take a look at it. It's just premature. We're just not that far along. We haven't invested a lot of money into that yet because we haven't gotten past stage 1 yet. But we're sensitive to that issue, and I know planning and zoning will be sensitive to that issue. So if screening is required, screening will be created.
Okay. Well, I look forward to the meetings. I thank you for taking my questions this evening.
Anytime. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
For the benefit of those who are new to this type of meeting, if you talk over each other, it breaks up the audio and makes it unclear. So I just ask you to be patient with each other and not talk over each other. Talk one at a time. It'll make everybody able to be heard. Thank you. Mr. Mira, you've been patient.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, someone brought up that the EDC was only concerned in tax revenue. Although I'm not ashamed of the tax revenue that new businesses bring to town, our concern is to expand the income for the town, not just the taxes, the income for the town. So it lessens the burden on our homeowners and the businesses that are here and enables the town to continue running in the black. So to say that we're involved in any project just for the taxes, it's not the case. We're looking out for the benefit of the town and what works to bring in income that balances the needs of the town with the income needed to run the town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think the point you're trying to make, Mr. Mira, is that you want other businesses to succeed. So commerce in the town helps that. Am I correct? Do I understand you correctly?
The businesses succeed as well as the homeowners have a lessened tax burden with the additional funds.
Thank you. Next, I have a question from Bob.
Good evening, Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Thank you, Chairman Sponi. I have a question for, I guess, either one of the two gentlemen speaking. I noticed that you are in the process of doing this in eight total data centers that you're looking at right now. Are you going to be able to build and fund 8 data centers at once, or are you looking to see where the best place for you to go at this particular time is?
Good question, and I can't give you an exact answer. I can tell you that certain sites, based on what we know now, would support certain size buildings, and certain customers that we have certain needs. Some are larger buildings, much larger than we proposed, and some are smaller, but not much smaller. We have only so much land, and we have only so much utility that can be developed and brought to the sites within the critical time path of 18 months during the build process. This is important to know because they will not come until we've satisfied the time frame necessary for them to sign on and JV the deal with us. So to answer the question, we're uncertain. We will not, I can tell you it's a 95%er. We will not build more. We cannot build 6 buildings at once, first of all. There isn't enough labor to do it. There isn't enough concrete to do it in a time frame, six of these buildings at once. It just wouldn't happen. I would anticipate that we would start a single building and hopefully a second building within 6 months, depending on which customers that we're in negotiation with decide where they want to go and which town they want to go to and which site they want to go to. So there is almost zero chance that you could build this many buildings. Even in the biggest data cluster, North Virginia, you can't see that many buildings at once. It would require a service upgrade to the power system that we couldn't possibly work through New England Power Pool and Wallingford Utility with. It would just be too much, too fast. I would say 6 buildings started, not the last couple finished within 5 years is probably a reasonable estimate based on what we're talking about now. Reasonable.
Okay, so you haven't built, your company hasn't built any buildings as of yet then?
We haven't built a single building, but the companies we're dealing with, one has built 54 hyperscale data centers. One just finished 1.5 million square feet. We're dealing with these as our JV partners. So we have plenty of associated experience, and we're using Turner Construction, the largest data builder in the world.
I know who Turner is. The question for you then is, you mentioned tax advantages. Are these buildings taxable to the community, or do you have to have a host agreement?
Well, the hosting agreement is sort of in lieu of the property taxes, and the hosting agreement generates a fee to the town much greater than the property taxes would be that would be associated with the real property taxes by the town.
So in essence, the town could look at, because you've already negotiated some rates with other communities. So would that be in line with this community, meaning Wallingford, say at Groton? Or if we're more advantageous to your contract, the person who wants to contract with you, would we be worth more or less depending on the desirability of our location?
Well, the contracts, some of it are already, I should say that we're dealing with Jana Small, who is the town attorney for Wallingford, and she has, for instance, the Groton agreement, I believe it is, right, Tom, that we've given them, that they have, I think.
Yes, they have that agreement, yeah.
And there are set amounts for so much megawatt, there's so much that's being used is what the fee agreements are based upon, the amount of juice or megawatts used per building.
All right. I mean, I like the idea. It's great tax advantage, but I don't think, so in essence, this isn't something that you're going to get to planning and zoning in a timely fashion. It can be built within the 18 months. You keep mentioning 18 months. Is that the time that the state has given you for your tax advantages? And you hope that they.
No, good question. No, 18 months is what the industry requires. They have to, before they come to town, we have to prove to them, and that's why these document sets are so critical, that they can achieve their goals within 18 months. That is a sited building built out fully with certificate of occupancy, being ready to load the servers. That's the time frame across the industry. And the tax piece is, once we take our paperwork from a building that we'd like to do in Wallingford, with all the spreadsheets and information to David Lehman at Economic Development, he stamps it, then you go to DRS, it starts a 5-year clock ticking. Everything has to be fully entitled, and you have to invest the 400 million within that period, or there's a clawback for all of the sales use property tax.
So, and just so I understand, the reason you're building this in this community in Groton and Basra and so forth is because of the municipal electrical units in each of these communities.
That's correct. That's
And so,
100% right.
So in essence, then, so you're not, none of the other communities, you can name any other town, North Haven, where Attorney Frisano's from, or anything of that nature, those aren't desirable communities to you because of Eversource or United Illuminating.
That is true, but that being said, I want you to know that, you know, we're not the only person in town. There are other entities, and I think that EDC Commissioner has indicated that he is working with Eversource and some people in another town. You know, obviously it's confidential. He didn't tell me it's confidential what they're doing. So I don't want it, I'm not saying that they're only going to be in municipal electric company locations. It's my understanding that at least the state is moving with EDC with Eversource. Now, what that deal is going to be comprised of, I can't speak to.
No, I was just wondering why the communities that were picked, and they all, the one common denominator was they were all municipal electrical providers. And that's, I was just wondering if they're, and I understand the cost of electricity is less. And so you would work a contract with Wallingford Electric where you would buy it below, you buy it at a wholesale rate. You wouldn't pay what a customer's paying. You would come in and buy a wholesale rate such as Nucor or Bristol Myers would have bought it at. You would come in and you'll negotiate that deal with the electric division.
That's right. We're going to buy the leftover utility that's in the New England grid in the day ahead market. We're going to buy the utility just like Wallingford buys it. Same formula. We've been through ISO New England with this already. And that's just how we're going to do it. And then, of course, you tack on distribution and you tack on final mile profit to the town. That's exactly right. Those are the components.
Thank you. Hopefully the Wallingford will be beneficial to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Before I come back to the council, we have one more question from a member of the public. Mr. Crowell, I just thought I'd give you the opportunity to ask your question yourself.
Yes, this is Rob Crowell. My question was, one, I just want to say, you know, thank you for considering moving this building 5, which is across the street. It's in people's backyards. And I was going to ask when the newest plans would be put online and also the height of that building.
The height of the buildings are going to be just slightly over 35 feet for 2 stories. And the reason is they're not really that tall, but on top there's a parapet wall that surrounds the outside of the building, and the venting and the air conditioners are all contained within that area, closed off, you know, in other words, for sound attenuation. Look, at this building 5 is unpopular. I'm going to have to talk to the engineers tomorrow. We're going to do the best we can, Rob, to move these buildings around so they're more comfortable. We've only made a first pass. That's it. Before we bring this to planning and zoning, we will do a preliminary meeting to just walk through to make sure that they're comfortable with it. Our engineer will do that. And then when you come to the meeting, we'll be sure we do, but we won't, we're getting enough pushback on that building. We'll do what we can to move what we need to move. We want, you know, we'll be sensitive to it. So I'm available. The new plans online, they're not really going to go online too soon. We have to get through this host fee agreement with the town first, and then we're going to spend some more money with the engineers to line up these plans and prep them. What we're doing now is soil testing and phase 1 and phase 2 that's required to do to transfer the properties.
All right, well, thank you for considering that. And also, I just, that building's a lot smaller than the other ones. What would be inside that building?
Servers, computers, basically on rack storage.
I thought maybe it might be an admin building, but okay, thank you.
We have one more in the chat bar from Ms. Polanski, who says that Patricia suggests you move all buildings deep enough inward so residents' homes do not see them. Too much traffic on North Farms. This can be good for the town if you make residents happy.
We're going to do everything we can to make the residents happy. We will.
All right, and coming back to the council, Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Quinn, Attorney Pisano. Certainly, Mr. Quinn, you've chosen a good attorney to represent you in this matter, and I appreciate that. You know, I don't know if you know, but not only am I a member of the town council, but I'm also a state representative, and I did vote in favor of the bill that brings you to us here tonight. And one of the reasons why I voted for that is the amount of local control over this issue. And I have to express to you that the North Farms area is very important to me. I grew up on North Farms, spent quarter of my life there. I know the area very well. The other site that you're considering, the Hilton Garden area, my house is between the two, my present residence. I'm very sensitive to this project, and you know, I appreciate you gentlemen coming here tonight. You know, ultimately, I'm going to defer to the residents on this. You know, my mother moved out of North Farms about 6 months ago, but she was at 966. So if you look at the numbers that we're dealing with in the residences, you can see, you know, she was right there, generally across the street. You know, I share a lot of the concerns. I think what may be of help to the residents out there is once a decision is made, that perhaps some renderings can be done to depict to them how it would look. I'm a little concerned about screenings that would screen a building of 35 feet high, because certainly like arborvitae or something like that, the natural screenings are not going to cut it, right? So, you know, I know I live right by the Anthem Blue Cross building, and which is, oh God, a half mile, you know, from there. And as part of the screening with that project, they raised the topography of the land that abutted the residential neighborhood and then put plantings on top of that. So, you know, a combination of natural as well as plantings can sometimes be helpful here. You know, my concern here is that there's a lot of deference being given to planning and zoning, which I do have a level of faith in. But I have to tell you that I don't know that I would be in favor personally of a host agreement that did not prevent access on North Farms from North Farms Road. I think that within the confines of the legislation that passed, that we could put some sort of a provision in there so that the chance of planning and zoning making a different decision doesn't happen. And I think that would be of help to the neighbors, help to me, you know, getting me to the finish line. The other issue that I have is the number of facilities. And I think you've expressed that it's impossible to build all of these at the same time. But, you know, once there's plans approved, there's reliance upon there being a number of facilities. I understand that you have expenses you're going to incur related to that. And, you know, we're going to have to hunker down if the first couple of buildings don't work to the satisfaction of the neighborhood. and that's a concern. So I would, a slow, steady, reliable approach would make me feel a lot better here. So, once again, I thank you, gentlemen, for coming here tonight and being able to answer the questions of the residents. I don't have any questions. I've been doing my due diligence and listening to what's been said tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and we will take what you say to heart and work on our plans accordingly. And I think what you're talking about makes sense. So we will take a look at all that.
Thank you.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Quinn, just one question. I too live on North Farms Road, but I'm a little bit a little bit removed from.
Everybody in town lives on North Farms Road, apparently.
I'm on the other side of 68, but
Is there anyone that doesn't live on North Farms Road? Please raise your hand. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I'm. This could just be my own ignorance about data centers in general, but is there any sort of not necessarily environmental, but anything like radiation type that's emitted through these type of data centers? Is there any science on that?
No, there's no radiation. No.
Okay, so
There's computers. There are computers behind tilt-up concrete walls. Okay, it's all a concrete building. That's how they build them now, and they're built to last 100 years. These buildings. So it's tilt-up concrete. There are computers inside on racks. A lot of computers inside on racks. And no, there's no like microwave radiation or any of that. The fiber is underground. We are going to have to connect all these sites to 91. We're working on that pathway issue now. We're going to need cooperation from the town. There will be a day that we ask to cut a road to put fiber in and maybe multiple fiber in, repair the road and repave it. That would be at the cost of the data center. So, but we will need to connect to 95 with big substantial fiber optics, not the stuff that's currently in the road and can't handle it. We need to beef it up. So to answer your question, yes, there's no radiation. No, we're not asking here. A couple of towns that may need a booster like that for a period of time until they put it in, but we're not asking for that here. You're close to the highway and you're close to main trunk fiber, so it'll be installed underground.
Great, good to hear. Thank you. Yeah, and it seems like you're recognizing the concerns of some of the
North Farms Road.
Yeah, so definitely appreciate your just looking into that and hopefully coming up with
We'll be all over it tomorrow morning. We'll make the calls early.
Wonderful, yeah, because I think this is a good, financially this seems great for the town if everybody's fears can kind of be resolved. So sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman.
So under our current media system, this is live streamed on YouTube, and it will be up for re-airing. It's going to be on YouTube to watch over and over again. If people were not able to make this meeting tonight and they do have questions, would you like to offer contact information for people who might have questions that couldn't be here tonight?
I can be contacted on the Got Space website. You just fill in the card and I'll respond to you. I can give you my phone number. My phone is busy almost all day, but I'll be happy to give it to you. My voicemail is frequently full. My phone number, if you're all ready, 508-726-2600. Prefer email, and it's easier for me to pick up the email and return your call if you can leave your number. But I'm usually overlapping calls most of the day. But thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to take calls and discuss things.
All right. Well, thank you for fielding the questions. Other councilors have said you do seem concerned about your prospective neighbors, and we'll see what comes about this in the coming months. At some point, if and when the council is in a position to approve the agreement, this will be on a council agenda for discussion. So
Okay.
thank you both for your candor. Everyone have a good night. I will adjourn this meeting and stop the recording.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Thank you all for your time.